Thank you all for coming. I'm getting used to this. Act 2 now. We are pleased to have a number of members of both the State Assembly and the State Senate here. I want to particularly acknowledge a couple of the key leaders on this piece of legislation. Certainly Speaker Jeff Fitzgerald, appreciate your leadership in the Assembly overall, but particularly on this legislation. In the Assembly, not only the Speaker, but Representative Jim Ott, as the committee chair, was very active in pushing forward our lawsuit reform. And in the State Senate, State Senator Rich Zipper has done a fabulous job, both through, from the standpoint of the Judiciary Chair, but also his involvement in economic development, as well as Senator Neil Kedzie, who helped at a critical time in terms of a key piece of an amendment throughout the legislation. And obviously all the members of the Assembly and Senate are here, but I wanted to acknowledge those four members in particular for their leadership and appreciate them being here, as well as the other members of the Senate and the Assembly that are here with us today. I also want to thank a number of organizations that are here representing a wide variety of groups, from small businesses in general to restaurants, to medical providers, to those involved with large-scale businesses and mid-sized businesses and others across the board. This really is yet another important day for those of us who believe that Wisconsin's open for business. We called just over 3 weeks ago, just down the way in the Rotunda, after taking the oath of office. I came back here and literally handed to the Speaker and the Senate Majority Leader letters calling the special session. And it was a part of being a team effort, that knowing that one of the best ways we could show both the people of this state, the employers of this state, as well as people and employers from other states that were looking to consider coming and bringing jobs to Wisconsin, the best way we could show that indeed we were open for business was to take swift action. Now, along the way last week, there was a story that ran nationally that asked why we were moving so quickly here. Because you see, in some states, the governor and the legislators have not even really, in some ways, even unpacked their boxes. I have a few boxes that aren't packed here. They said, well, why are you moving so quickly in all this? Well, it's real simple. I went, and many of the members here who were up for election this past fall went around the state, and we were part of conducting a job interview for the jobs we now hold today in this Capitol. And that job interview, at least for me, was about telling the people of this state what I was going to do as their CEO to turn the state around. Because we face an economic challenge, an economic crisis in this state. And I said it's not one for complacency, it's not one for tiptoeing around the challenge, it's one to take it head on. And so I laid out very clearly what we're going to do, and many of the folks on the ballot laid out very similar messages to the people in their respective districts. And so part of that interview involved the process of me saying that we would call a special session and act on bills that lowered the cost of doing business, made it more attractive to do business in this state. And today, one of those key elements is here, because time and time again, on survey after survey, employers tell us that one of the most important elements when they consider expanding and investing in a state is what the litigation climate is. And for us, again, we didn't want to wait 6 months or a year. The majority of what was in this legislation that I'll be signing into law today are things that have been debated and passed in the past. Unfortunately, we're not signed into law, and so we're moving forward on these. These are not new ideas. These are concrete ideas that we believe will make it easier for people to do business in the state. At the same time, we protect the consumers here in the state of Wisconsin as well. For us, there's a balance out here. This is the balance we're trying to create, to make sure certainly those who do damage and do harm are rightfully going to be penalized, even when this act becomes law. But for those who've been involved in the past, not only been directly brought into court, but for those who've been threatened through frivolous lawsuits, particularly for our small businesses, they're going to receive relief today because of Act 2 as we move forward with cutting back on frivolous lawsuits, on out-of-control lawsuit abuse in the state of Wisconsin. That's what this is really about. That's what our focal point is today. And on each of the acts we'll be signing in the coming days is to make it more affordable, whether it's through lower taxes, lower litigation costs, fewer regulatory costs, or making it easier for workers and family farmers to access affordable health care. Every step of the way, we're going to focus on what it takes to get this state working again. And so I want to, again, say thank you to the members of the State Assembly and State Senate who voted for this measure, helping us partner together, send a very clear message The Speaker and I and the Senate Majority Leader had printed another column today in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, similar to the one we ran a week or so ago in the Chicago Tribune, where we sent a very clear message that indeed we're open for business. And in the case of the Tribune, we told them, real simple, for those businesses who don't like the climate in Illinois, escape to Wisconsin, because we're heading in the right direction. We're moving down the right path, and we're not stopping now. This is the first series of tests to show people how serious we are about opening Wisconsin up for business. There'll be plenty more in the future, some that will come from the executive branch, some that will come from the legislative branch. Our goal is for things that help us put people to work. We're going to work together between the two branches and the two parties to get things done, and that's really our priority, and our focal point. That's what we got elected to do, and that's what we're going to continue to do day in and day out. So before I sign the act, and I'll invite our lawmakers to join us, since the press is here, and I'm sure you got a few other questions as well, I'll entertain a couple questions to begin with.
Some have raised some concerns about what's going to be taken out of the realm of public records. Clearly, there are records that can no longer be admitted in court. And attorneys are saying that they're not quite sure what's going to be public record and what's not. Do you feel that this changes the public records law at all? Will your administration continue to release records that have been released in the past once this bill is signed into law?
My administration absolutely will. And if you look at what's in the law, things like inspections, things of that nature, will continue to be a part of open records. This does not change this. This does not alter this. The key difference, I think they try to hang up and gloss over, is the question over peer reviews. That is different than an investigation or an investigation that's being conducted. Those things will remain in the same manner they were before I signed this act into law.
Governor, you had said that you want to change a climate of out-of-control lawsuits. Mm-hmm. What evidence do you have to show that lawsuits are out of control?
Well, in our case, it's a combination of not only suits that are filed, but I think if you interviewed any of the organizations who are here today, that they would tell you that one of the biggest challenges, particularly for small businesses, is not just ending up in court, but the threat of lawsuits and what impact that has, and in many cases how they're forced to settle and the challenges they face in that regard. It's why, again, the things simply put here are things that still protect the public, still protect if somebody does something, if they manufacture a product and it's defective, there's still going to be relief under the legal system under this legislation. You're just not going to see people drawn in who weren't a part of that problem in the first place. Good example. I grew up in Delavan, a small town. We used to have a Ben Franklin. We used to call him Five and Dimes on Main Street. If they're selling a product and that product was made by a manufacturer that had a defect in it, and they had nothing to do with it other than the fact it was sold at their business, to me, the claim for the person who's frustrated should be with the manufacturer, not with that small business who had nothing to do with the manufacturing of that product. That's one of the things protected here. So for examples like that time and time again, same idea with industries where one of the key things we're sending a very clear message on is about 5 years ago, the Wall Street Journal ran a piece on the editorial page called Alabama North, where they pointed out that because of the actions that were done in our legal system here, you had manufacturers who had nothing to do with a product that was at default being pulled in just because they were in the same industry at that time, developing the same sorts of products. That sent a poor, obviously their Alabama North reference was a poor reference about this not being a good place to conduct business in. We're reversing that. We're very clearly saying this is a good place to do business, and we're going to hold people accountable. We're going to hold employers and businesses accountable if they take actions that are legitimately wrong. But we're not going to pull other people in who aren't. And I think it's a part of it, not only what's happened, but also the threat that many of our small businesses face because of that litigious climate we live in.
Got time for one more question?
Some critics have also raised concerns about the change in expert testimony, saying that could imperil attempts to keep people in cars behind bars under the Chapter 980 statute. Are you concerned that it'll be harder to get people that...
I think the record shows very clearly at the federal level, the federal court system, and at many other states who have similar provisions in their statutes, that that's not a problem, and in fact, arguably, making sure it may be of greater benefit in long term to prosecutors, because defendants will not be able to use individuals who aren't experts in their field in terms of the defense. So I think in the end, it's actually a good thing for prosecutors because they're using the good guys who are experts in their field, and the folks who are defendants who may be stretching it won't be able to bring that into court. Great.
Either like stand more or if you want to stand over here, that's fine.
We're working on it.